Well, 2015 has come, and fortunately has gone, and we're still here. What a year it's been. Wild weather from start to finish, from the hottest to the coldest. We had blizzards in Arizona and sunbathing in New York City on Christmas Day, and floods in between. Now, we're fortunate to live where we do, aren't we? We've missed most of the worst of it, thanks be to God. May God have mercy on the Californians and the Mississippians and the Missourians and the Texans and just about anywhere else but here. And then there was violence this year, all sorts of violence. I mean, we've come to expect it in the Middle East, but in Paris. Terrorist attacks. Crazy people with guns. In schools, in colleges, in clinics, even in churches. And politicians, my word. All year long at each other's throats like mad dogs in an arena, and they haven't accomplished a darn thing. And what they have accomplished is kind of scary. And the race for the presidency of 2015 is any sign of what 2016 is going to be like. This is in for a long ride. Just when we need some serious people to talk about serious problems and take some serious action, we got what we got. And besides that, the Packers lost to both the Bears and the Lions, and they got to face the Vikings tonight. Well, it's a new year. You can always hope. Person of my acquaintance once referred to another year, not this one, but to another year, I don't remember which one. He said, "What kind of year was it? It was a year like a kidney stone. You're just glad that it passed with a minimum amount of pain and little damage." That's 2015 for you. On the other hand, at times like this, I'm always reminded of Pogo the Possum. Remember Pogo the Possum, the old swamp philosopher? The young kids won't remember, and he hasn't been in the comics for many, many years, but there was Pogo and Archie Alligator and Churchy. They all lived in the Okefenokee Swamp. Any year, one of the Christmas offerings, the Pogo cartoons, it shows Pogo standing beneath this shiny brown Christmas tree, a little bit triangle thing, looking up at a star, and he says, "Any year that ends in Christmas can't be all bad." Well, 2015 is gone, and we're into a new year. And there's an old familiar word before us today. In the gospel, I mean, it's a good word to start the year. The word is this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Of course, we all know that word. It's the word that begins the Gospel of John. We know it, and well, maybe today would be a good day to recognize it. That's a nice word. Recognize, recognize, to know it again. To acquaint ourselves again with what this word means. In the beginning was the Word, says John. En arche en hologos. That's what it sounds like in Greek. I know, because I had to memorize that verse. That was the first verse of the New Testament I had to memorize in Greek. En arche en hologos. That's the last of the New Testament I had to memorize in Greek. But over the years, I came to appreciate those words and what they meant, and the depth and the richness of them. In the beginning, John says, en arche. Literally, at the source, where things begin, where they have their roots. In the beginning, at that beginning of all things, was the Word, the Logos. Logos, there's a tremendously significant word in the Gospel of John in the whole New Testament. Logos it means word, simply. As in our way, logic or loquacious talking, a lot of words. But it also indicates particular words about particular things, as we talk about biology and zoology and psychology, words about life, bios, and about animals and about the soul. But it's even more than that. Logos indicates the reason of all things, the order, the pattern, the rhythm, the harmony of things, if you will. It indicates the truth behind all things. That's Logos. And John says, where things begin, where all things begin, there, just there, is an ordering, structuring, harmonizing word that is reality, that is truth, in arche, in Logos. And that word, John goes on, he says, is from God, it's with God, it's the very stuff of God. We can dare say that. In fact, that word was God, is God, will be God, shares the reality and the being and the power and the intention of God. It shares the very life of God from the heart of God. The evangelist Matthew, if you remember from your Christmas stories, talked about Emmanuel, which means God with us. John ups the ante. He talks about being the very heart of God, at the heart of life, the Logos. And this word, John says, this word is not some abstraction, some philosopher's dream, some preacher's nightmare. It's not just a mental concept dreamed up or fantasized. Rather, he says, this word became flesh, dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. The presence of God became flesh. You know, we've gone through so many Christmases, we've heard that word so many times that we forget what a scandal it is. The word became flesh. The word is sarx in Greek. It's a hard word. It's not a pretty word. It's not a baby word. Sarx, it even sounds hard. It means the physical body, the stuff that we are. For Paul, it even meant the stuff that we are subject to sin and death and corruption. Sarx is the body that ends up in the sarcophagus, the tomb, the grave. The word, John says at the beginning, shares our corpse-like nature. That's what John says. The word that as God chooses to dwell with us who sin, who fail, who ultimately must die and be buried and rot. That word, he says, dwells with us. I think our translation says lives with us. It's kind of a weak translation. Dwells with us. Skene is the word it comes from, for tent. It camps out with us in the wilderness. In this wilderness, as God joined Israel in the wilderness at Sinai. This God joins us on our pilgrim path through all of life's barren ways. It's filled to the brim. It's abundant. It's overflowing. It's complete with God's own grace and God's own truth. The Word doesn't come empty-handed like an unwelcome guest at Christmas. It comes with laden hands, with gifts galore. It's Santa Claus in spades. And gifts galore is just the right word, because this Word made flesh among us who sin and fail and die and lives now in the presence of a glory that's just beginning. This doxa glory shining forth is like a new sun in a dark world, bringing new light, new morning, and new hope. And it comes from no one less than God. Because of this Word flesh among us, John says, he makes an even more astonishing claim. He says, to him who received him, believed in his name, Christ gives power to become the children of God. Born not of blood or the will of man or the will of flesh, but of God. Be reborn. We, John says, we who die in sin and fail, are given a chance for such a life as flows from the heart of God. That changes everything. Changes everything now. It changes everything through the new year and through all years to come. The presence of God in flesh, in Christ, new possibilities are open for us, a new future, a new hope. And the darkness has not overcome it, nor will it. Just now, this turning of the year, with all the talk about doom and gloom, it's a good time to recognize, to know anew what God has done in the flesh, in our midst. To be amazed, to be thankful, and to sing with all the angels and the shepherds as we do at Christmas time. Years ago, I used to visit with old Howie. Howie was a Chicago police captain. Howie was tough as nails. Howie was very sick. Howie hated Hillary Clinton. I never quite figured that out. He just hated her. All I need to do is mention her name and I get his blood pressure up 20 points. And during one visit, we used to have some really interesting talks. So during one visit, he said to me, you know, Pastor, you look at all these disasters going on out in the world. This was during the 90s. All that stuff, floods and storms and earthquakes and violence and Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I said, I know. He said, well, you know, you just got to think with all that stuff going on that the end must be getting pretty clear, pretty near. That's pretty scary. Yeah, I said, oh, it's pretty scary. And I thought, you're dying. That's pretty scary. And you know that's coming too. But I had one of those rare moments. One of those moments of inspiration. I'm not like Donald Trump. I'm not that smart to think this up myself. But I said, Howie, I said, if it is the end, is it really so bad? It's God's end that's coming, isn't it? It's Christ we will be with, isn't it? And he sat quietly for a moment and finally said, you know, it helps to know that. Because I think it was his end he was worried about. Helps to know that. Yeah, it only makes all the difference in the world, it seems to me. In our world, it makes all the difference between light and darkness, life and death, hope and despair, heaven and hell. There's an old story about Luther. He said someone asked him one day, they said, what would you do if you knew the end of the world were coming tomorrow? You may have heard this story, don't stop me. He said, I would plant a tree. I never quite known what he meant by that. But I'd like to think that what he meant was that he would like to be found when the end came on the side of life, planning for life, providing for life, looking forward to a future filled with life. Because that's what the Word made flesh provides for us. We've passed into a new year. The word for us today is in archein ho logos. In the beginning was the Word. In the present is the Word. In the future will be the Word. And that Word is in flesh to dwell among us, full of grace and truth, and the darkness will not overcome it. As we enter this new year, may we be found planting trees, people of life, of peace, of hope, of love, for God so graciously and abundantly blesses us and empowers us that we might be that. Poe observes that a year that ends with Christmas can't be a whole man. True enough, but it's also true that any year that begins with Jesus, with the Word made flesh that is at the heart of Christmas, any year that begins that way can't be all bad. But instead is filled with the promises of God, filled to the brim with grace and forgiveness, and joy and love. What more could we ask for life and for our future? So happy, blessed